Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela, and don't forget to subscribe if you love the videos. I have a very special guest today. His name is Bob Furniss, and Bob is an award-winning customer service consultant. Discovered his true calling when his daughter Keesha was diagnosed with breast cancer. And this life-altering experience transformed the quiet family man into a passionate advocate, leading him and his wife Susan to establish Warrior Princess, which is a nonprofit educating young women about early detection. And he has a memoir that shares the profound lessons learned while supporting his daughter through cancer. And he reveals how his journey reshaped his understanding of love, strength, and purpose, teaching him to practice what he calls the platinum rule, loving others as they wish to be loved, which is beautiful. Through his authentic storytelling, Bob offers a rarely seen perspective of cancer's impact on fathers and families while championing awareness that could save other daughters' lives, which is amazing. So thank you for taking the time today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for that kind opening, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure. I always read the bio to give people an idea of who is on the podcast and also their story. But tell us a little bit more about how you decided to do this awareness piece, you and your wife. Yeah.
So our daughter was only 30 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And we didn't, at no time did we ever think about she was having some problems with her back and some problems with her breathing, and she was going to a regular doctor, but nobody, including the doctor, thought about the breast cancer aspect of this. And then late one night when I was in California for business, I got a call from my wife, and she says that Keesha was having trouble breathing and her arm was hurting. So she thought she was having a heart attack. So she took her to the emergency room. And a couple hours later, I got the call that no one ever wants to get. And they said to my wife and my daughter, that they see what they believe is cancer in her lungs. And it turned out to be breast cancer, which had metastasized into her lungs. I flew back that night, and it was so I felt like we had a couple of different directions to go. We could focus on how in the world did this happen, and what did you miss, and how did we get here? But very quickly, it became evident that there was no reason to focus on that at that time. We focus on it now, but not at that time, but to focus on life going forward and how do we sustain life as long as possible. So stage 1 breast cancer has about a 95 to 98% breast survival rate. It drops down to about in the 70s at stage 2. It drops down into the 60s and 50s at stage 3, and it drops into the 20s and 30s at stage 4. Stage 4 is what we used to call terminal cancer, but we don't see that being used very often. But very quickly, I got on to Google that night, and all three of us got onto Google separately on our phone, which is the absolute worst thing you can do. But we found a lot of information and found a lot of bad possibilities. But our focus became on how does she live as long as possible? And to tell my first story about her that's in the book. So she was uh, a child that had pretty severe ADD, not ADHD, the hyper kind, but the ADD. I could walk into her room and say, I need you to put on your socks and your shoes, and I need you to put your books in your bag and I need you to meet me in the car in 5 minutes. And I found out that I gave her three too many things to do because she could only focus on one at a time. So over time, we learned how to adapt to it. She eventually went on the meds and she sort of got better. She eventually quit taking the meds when she was in college because she said it made her feel weird. But what was strange, or what is a reality to some people with ADD, is that you have the ability to focus on one thing at a time. And so that became her superpower. She focused on life and focused on how do I live and what do I do. When she went to the oncologist, she always ended the visit with, okay, Dr. Schwartzberg, if this one doesn't work, what's next? And so her persona, she went from being my little girl that I could just about do anything to fix any problem in her life to being my little girl who became a strong woman that had something that I couldn't fix, I couldn't make better. And I think that that was what I what I had to accept, is that she was probably not going to get better, although she got better at times, but that most likely cancer would end up taking her life. And it did when she was just 34, 4 years later. It took her life. But during the time she was alive and as a survivor during those 4 years, she was a warrior. And so she had grown up with me calling her my little princess. So I began to call her Warrior Princess, which is why we named the nonprofit Warrior Princess.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it's not often, or at least not in my circles, that I've heard a father talk about awareness as far as breast cancer goes. And so that seems very unique and I think hugely important for other fathers out there as well, and families in general, to have your perspective.
One of the first times I things I wrote after she died, after cancer took her life. I wrote an article to the Commercial Appeal, and which is the local newspaper here in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was the question that every dad should ask his daughter, and it went viral. It is still active since 2018 on their website. It's on our website also if you want to go and read the whole story.
Mm.
But it took it from this point of a dad that I asked her, was she being careful when she got into the car at night? Was she being careful when did she have gas in the car? Was she being careful when she was walking across the parking lots? All of the dad questions. But I realized that I didn't ask her, are you doing self exams and are you talking to your healthcare provider about your breast health? Because those weren't dad questions. But I can't tell you the number of dads that I've told this story to over the last 5 or 6 years, 7 years, that have similar reactions that I had, which is, oh my gosh, I never thought of that, but I'm going to ask her. I talked to somebody this week that has three daughters in the 25 to 45 age range that we focus on. And he said, I've never asked that question, but I'll ask that question by the end of the day. And that's what we hope. That's what I hope happens, is that it is unusual for a father or a man to talk about breast. I can assure you, I've had some discussions about breast cancer with women and with my female board members that when I hung up, I'm like, okay, that was a little bit uncomfortable. We were talking about what was the picture going to look like of the breast on the marketing? Was it going to have a nipple or was it not going to have a nipple? Like those kind of questions are not normal for a dad to talk about, especially with his daughter. And so I tell fathers, just do this. Just talk to your daughter or your wife and say, I heard a man speak, and then tell them the story that I've told you about my daughter. And that if she had done those things, there's a fairly good chance that she would still be here.
Mm.
I don't blame myself, but I do wish that somebody had said to me what I just said, which is talk to your daughters and your wives about breast cancer. And if I were having conversations with women about their husbands, I would say talk to him about prostate cancer, because those two things are not talked about very often. We'll talk about lung cancer and we'll talk about the details of it, but we sort of shy away from female cancer.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of things that we don't want to talk about. I mean, this whole podcast is about grief, and people don't talk about grief until they have to. It's generally not something that we just throw into the regular conversation. And yet, just like breast cancer awareness, it needs to be. It's one of those things that's it's important to talk about these things and so many others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've read so much. I've read so much about grief. You've probably heard this before, but there's a word for when you lose your husband or wife. It's a widow or a
Yes.
widower, but there is no word for losing a child. And I'm convinced that's because it's so awful, no word can hold up to what it's like to lose a child. And what she taught me was to just keep going, to look at life and say, I'm going to make it. I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's back in 2020. And I tell my friends that they'll say, how are you doing? And I say, I'm doing okay. And they want to go a little deeper. And I say, well, Keisha, the reality is I want to be laying in the bed in a fetal position and feeling sorry for myself. But Keisha set the bar really high when she got sick. And so I have to live up to that bar, is how I feel. I really do feel that sometimes I'll have a bad day. In fact, that's something that you need to tell people that are facing death or facing a bad a disease or medical problem, is it's okay to have a bad day. We used to have to tell Keisha, hey, it's okay for you to have a bad day. It's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve, because when you find out what she found out, she had a grieving process before she died, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our grief has been just hard to explain. And I believe that I've got a couple of friends who lost children, and I sometimes feel like they're the only ones that have any understanding of what it's like. And even then, it's different because grief is personal, and it is very personal.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Yeah. And I was thinking about your bio, and you had written in there something about the platinum rule of loving others as they wish to be loved. Can you talk more about where that came from?
So I picked that up when I was speaking and writing and consulting into contact centers and customer service worlds. I used to talk a lot about leading with your heart. And if in a contact center, if you're the director of a contact center, there's 100 to 300 to 500 people in the call center, and there's various levels of management, and there's everybody's wanting to get promoted, and everybody has wants and needs, and some people are transient, some people are only going to be there for 6 months and they're going to leave, and some people are going to stay. But from a business perspective, that rule became important to me, that I love people where they are. And the most easy idea behind that is to understand what's important to them in life. If you walk up to somebody's cube and they have 27 pictures of a three-year old on their cube, you better believe that that is what's important to them in life, whether it's being a mom or being a grandmom or being an aunt or whatever. But if you just stop for a moment and ask them about that, as a manager or a leader, or you begin to understand what's important to them, then they begin to care what's important to you and what's important to the company, which is to provide good service. So you build relationships. And I've had some people tell me that I not only don't love some of the people that work for me, but I don't even like some of the people that don't work for me. But you have to get over that. And then the platinum rule for my daughter is from a different perspective. My daughter used to frustrate me a lot with her ADD. I'm a type A, work from a list, 27. I've got ADD also, 27 to 40 tabs open on the screen, and I'm multitasking, and I'm convinced that it's my superpower is multitasking. I realize everybody tells me it's not good for you, but it's what I do. I struggled with her ADD, and I struggled a lot. And when she got sick, all of those things that mattered before didn't matter anymore. And to love her the way that she wanted to be loved was to accept that she had ADD, was to accept that she didn't want to be with the in crowd at school. She just wanted two or three friends, and she was happy in her world of two to three friends. She didn't want to be, she called herself a band geek, a self identified band geek, because she was in the marching band. And as a father, you want the best for your child. But what I really learned is I could have done a better job of loving her the way she was. And I know for a fact that over those 4 years, I loved her more deeply than I had ever loved her before. And she knew that.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, and I know, this whole journey of cancer, there's a lot to do with the medical profession. And it comes to mind to me how I was so frustrated with the oncologist when Blaine passed away because I never heard from him again. And it felt like he was like an intimate part of our lives before that. And
Yeah.
it's funny how you get angry at the craziest things. But how did you navigate that? And what advice would you have to a medical professional that's working with families and cancer?
Well, we may have had a little bit different experience after she died because of the nonprofit where she was being seen at a clinic called West Cancer Center. And her doctor, Dr. Schwartzberg, was, I guess he's probably, he's either, I'm 65, so I think he's 62 to 70, somewhere in there. Um, and she had a grandfather relationship with him.
Mm,
That's the best that I can describe. One time when she said, "Well, what are you going to put me on next time if this doesn't work?" And he said he named a drug, and she said, "Now hold on a second. That's a sister drug to the one I was on 3 times ago. So I don't think that one's going to work." And he went, "You know what? You're right. That one's not going to work." So they had this relationship that was back and forth and
mm,
very adaptive and very supportive. So I think we had a doctor. He had been my wife's doctor 10 years before when she had cancer, and she had been my mom's doctor 15 years before when she had cancer. So we had a relationship. I was amazingly surprised when he and three of the nurses from West showed up at her funeral, her celebration uh,
aw,
session. And we now partner with West Cancer Foundation, which is an offshoot of West. So we're back at events for West, and we see Dr. Schwartzberg. Although he's moved away, he comes back for events here, and we see her PA that we saw. I don't know. Keesha went to the doctor a lot during those 4 years. So we saw her PA, and we see her nurses when Susan's been back for checkups. So, what I would say to the medical My number one message to the medical world is don't rule out breast cancer as early as you're ruling it out. Like you're not looking, you're not even thinking about breast cancer because the lady is 25 or 26 or 27 or even 30 years old. Your problems with her back, problems with her breathing. No one tied that to, well, have you had a breast exam recently? Are you going to the gynecologist to get a breast exam? Or if not, the regular healthcare doctor, your PCP, can give you a clinical exam to look for spots. And about 80, almost 80% of breast cancer in America is found by the woman first. So she finds something, she finds a spot, or she finds something that isn't just right. And she goes to the doctor, and then they start doing the test, and they find out that she has either stage 1 or stage 2 or whatever, or that it's nothing. That's what we're really hoping to find, is that it's nothing. But it was just a reality that I tried to deal with it by supporting her. I tried to support her by doing things for her. We had a bucket list bucket. It's a metal bucket. It says bucket list. It's still downstairs in the living room. And whenever she would think of something she wanted to do, she would write it down. And so she was a Luke Bryan fan. She went to 8 different Luke Bryan concerts in those 4 years.
Wow.
If he was within driving distance, my wife was going to take Keesha to see Luke Bryan. She went to a Steelers game 2 different times. We were big Steeler fans, Pittsburgh Steeler fans, and a friend of ours set it up. She ended up meeting, being down on the field and meeting some of the players. And one of the players ended up taking off his pink cleats and giving them to her as she sat in the wheelchair. And I've got this a crazy video of me showing the crowd as I panned the crowd that were at the game, and I ended up on her, and she's holding the shoes in her hand, and she's got this smile that was more radiant than the lights in the stadium.
Yeah.
And we realized that those kind of trips and trips to Colorado were trips that we were making life happen in spite of. There were times we had to cancel. There were times that she couldn't last as long as we wanted her to last, or she wanted to last. There were things that were on the list that we didn't get to. But I'm convinced that she lived longer because she would walk out of a Luke Bryan concert and say, "Hey, we're going to Disney in 3 weeks,"
Yeah.
or "Hey, we're going to another concert in 5 weeks." And so she always had something to look forward to. And that was my job, and my wife's job was to give her something in advance to look forward to.
Mm. Wow. That's awesome. Tell me more about the Warrior Princess organization that you've started.
So I was, so she had asked me to help her write her story. And while she was sick, she was involved with, she was living her life out loud on social media. And I would post something about a weekend that we had or a trip that we had, and she would forward it or copy it and repost it. And so I was doing a lot of capturing of what was going on. And we didn't talk a lot about how we got to here. We talked a lot about how we're going to continue to live. And she, I asked her as we were winding down her life in the last year, we had some pretty serious conversations. And one of them was, I want you to tell other people about my story because I want, I don't want anybody to go through what I've been through, and I don't want any parents to go through what you and mom have gone through. So I started trying to think of what could I do? What would a nonprofit do? And I was in Boston for business about 6 or 8 months after she died. And I got through early and I found out that the Cheers bar, the famous Cheers bar, was just a couple of blocks away. So I walked over to Cheers and sat down at the bar and ordered a beer. And I was sitting there thinking about Norm and Sam and Diane and everybody from Cheers. I was a big Cheers fan. And a couple came in and sat down beside us, and she she asked the question after about 10 minutes that nobody had asked me at that point. She said, "How many children do you have?" And in a 2 or 3 second, what seemed like eternity, I questioned, do I just say one? Do I say two and tell the story? Do I bring down, is this the kind of environment where you want to tell a sad story in a bar? We've been talking about positive things and life, and I decided I wasn't going to not say I had a daughter. So I said I had two. I told him about my son. I told him about Keesha. And as we were talking, the father looked over at his wife and said, okay, we have we have a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old daughter. Do you know if they are going to the gynecologist and if they're doing breast exams? And are you doing breast exams? And she said, I'm not doing them as much as I should, and I don't have any idea whether they're going to the gynecologist or whether they're talking about it with their healthcare provider. But you better believe before we get on the plane or before the night's over, we're going to know that answer. And so when I walked out and got in the Uber and I was riding back to the airport, it occurred to me that was it. Mm-hmm. If I just tell her story, if I just share her story with dads and with moms and with women who have the ability to help save lives by talking to their daughters or talking to their aunt or talking to their cousin or talking to their mother about breast cancer, that there's a way to help save people. So our nonprofit is focused on that. It's focused on telling Keesha's story. We have these which hang on, they hang on the shower head, and they're waterproof. They have the instructions on how to do a self-exam, and they have the icons along here. These are available on our website. If you just go to the website at warriorprincess.org, it's at the top of the very first page. If you click there, we will mail you one for you and one for how many people you want. In fact, if you have a women's group or a church group or any kind of group that you want to make this part of your October event, or you want to focus on breast cancer, we will, if you're a doctor's office or wherever we get a chance to put these, we will send them to you. We'll mail them to you free of charge. And that's what a lot of the donations, the majority of the donations that we accept at Warrior Princess go for, is to buy those and mail those to women.
Wow, that is so awesome. And what a unique story, how you came about all of what you do. And I think it's truly something that you've made something so positive out of something that could be so negative. And so it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's
Thank you.
amazing.
Grief is there also. The book includes the stories about when she lost her hair. That was such a poignant moment. She had beautiful, thick blonde hair, and when she lost it for the first time, it was traumatic. And we had somebody come to the hospital. She was losing just entire tufts of hair to shave it. And so she was crying, and the lady cutting her hair was crying, and I was crying, and her mom was crying, and my sister was crying, and the lady with her was crying, and everybody was dealing with the reality of cancer. So I think that's something that I've also told other women that, or other people that have friends who have cancer, is it's going to be a traumatic moment when a woman loses her hair for the first time. And she, like every woman, wanted to wear a wig, and then the wig got hot, and then she took it off and went somewhere, and for the rest of the time she was like, I'm rocking this bald head.
Yeah.
I'm rocking this bald head. But the book does include the grief aspect, and there are times when I tell these stories and I can't get through them. And then there are other times I tell the story and I'm okay. But grief, I don't know if you've ever seen the photo. I posted it to Facebook of the statue where it's a statue that's sitting on a park bench and the whole body is a hole. So
Oh
they have
yeah, I have
it has
seen that.
legs. It has legs hanging down.
Yes.
It's sitting back on the bench, and the whole body is a big hole, and then it's got
Mhm.
arms on the outside and a head on top of it. And to me, that's what I feel like sometimes. That's what I feel like anytime I think about her is there's this emptiness that I can't fill, but I know she wants me to live life. I know she doesn't want me to be sad all the time. I think she probably gives me some grace and says it's okay to have bad days and it's okay to have bad hours and grief is tough. And one other note about grief is I don't know that everybody fits in this category, but I think the majority of us fit in this category. We want to talk about our loved one. So don't not talk about her. Like I love when somebody tells me a story about Keesha. I just, especially if it's somebody I don't know that well. And we had somebody that came here from to work on our heating and air, and the guy saw her picture on the wall and said, "Are you Keisha's parents?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he went, "Man, I was in band with her, and she was the nicest person in the world. She was, she always had something positive to say. She always had a smile when she saw me walking across campus. And she was so sweet to my girlfriend. And so it's okay to talk about it. So we may cry,
Hmm.
like we may react, but I would rather talk about her than not talk about her. And
Absolutely.
that to be what's in the room. Does that make sense? I know
Oh,
you went through.
absolutely. And like you say, those are really special. The ones that you don't know about, the peripheral people whose lives they've touched and you don't know. And then you
Right.
gain this information, and it's just so beautiful to have another
Yeah.
piece of them, right? It's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Someone told me about the book. After I read the book, I wish I had known her better. And I feel like that's the best review I could possibly get is a review that says that. The book is broken up into 4 or 5 parts. It's before cancer when she was growing up, and then it's the diagnosis, the post diagnosis, what we went through around her death, and then the story of the book itself and how we named the book. It's a pretty long story, so I'll just say if you read the book, you'll understand why we named it On to Blue.
Mm. And where can people find the book?
You can find it on Amazon. It actually was named a #1 bestseller a couple of weeks ago. It is under, you can search on, so I'll give you 3 ways to find it. You can find it on Amazon by searching On to Blue and my last name, which is Furniss. It doesn't always come up with just On to Blue, but On to Blue with my last name, it will come up. You can also go to ontobluebook.com, and that's a link that takes you to the book on Amazon and has some more stories and some examples from the book. It's just a site about the book. And then lastly, you could go to warriorprincess.org, which is our nonprofit, and there are links there for being able to buy the book on the front page and links to our nonprofit. There's also resources there. If you don't know how to do a self breast exam, there are videos available on the website. There are resources for people who have cancer and need more information, there's some great organizations that we have links on our resources page for someone to go to find out all the information they need. And by the way, I love the pink flowers behind
Oh,
you. That
thanks.
those are little moments when things like that happen. They're little moments where we see Keesha
Mm.
that we don't expect. We see little moments like that where you could have put any color flower up. You chose pink today, and it was perfect.
And it's so interesting. I just put those up there and they're actually out of my garden. They're
Oh
peonies
wow,
in my garden. So before
peonies,
that, I had
peonies.
white flowers, but I just changed them up. So it's
Okay,
for you.
well, thank you. I thought of that whenever we first came on.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, I feel her presence here. Is there anything
Thank you.
else that you want to share before we go?
So in the book, I was a business writer for a long time. So I used to always, I would have to write a story and then I had to give you what you could do with it. And these are the 3 steps you take to be better as a manager or whatever. So I found myself wanting to do that. And I decided to name them Keisha isms. And they're just little sayings that either I found in her diary or that she said along the way and I wrote down. But one of them is don't let your disabilities affect your ability to see the positives in life. So that was the way she looked at her ADD, is she looked at it through the lens of don't let the disability affect your ability. And then the other one was she wrote in big letters, just keep swimming. And I thought, that's different. Where did that come from? And I found out that it was a saying from the movie Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
And Dory was lost with her other friend, and Dory just kept saying, "Just keep swimming. We'll be okay. Just keep swimming." And I thought that was such a powerful, simple 3 words to life. Of in the time of grief, just keep swimming. It doesn't get. I don't think grief gets better. I do think it gets different, but there are moments when it's as raw as it ever is. And for me, there's a moment every day where I have not forgotten that she's gone, but I am reminded that she's gone.
Mm.
So it may be 20 minutes, it may be 5 minutes after I wake up, it may be an hour after I wake up, but I relive that. And I think she was probably writing that to me. Just keep swimming, Dad. It's going to be okay.
What great advice for people. Because, yes, moving through this is hard. And sometimes we just have to be reminded to just keep moving.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you again for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And I'm encouraging people to go check out Warrior Princess and check out your book and certainly take all the advice that you've gotten today through this interview to heart. And I want to thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to your audience. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening. And bye for now.